Hello, my name is Kyle Biggeray, and I'm here to talk to you today about motion sickness and virtual reality. To recap some of the data from my previous presentation, Steam currently counts nearly 1,700,000 users with VR headsets, and approximately 70% of the survey responses that I gathered from VR players stated that they experience motion sickness. This relates to physical pleasure and the emotional experiences VR content can provide. Here I'd also like to reintroduce you to Oscar and John, the two personas that I developed during the first presentation, and the story of Oscar's nice white rug. Oscar is part of the 30% of people that don't experience motion sickness in VR. He can play intense games like Boneworks with ease. John feels fine in stationary games like Beat Saber because his motion sickness isn't triggered. However, ramping up the intensity triggers John's motion sickness, which is why we said goodbye to Oscar's nice white rug from the first presentation. Because of his negative experience, John now associates VR with motion sickness and is unlikely to recommend or try it again. From this, the primary user group is set, where I would like to help those with motion sickness in intense games. Secondarily, I would like to benefit the VR community as a whole, as a larger audience will create more incentive for content. Combining the opportunity and objective, I want to create something to help reduce the feeling of sickness while in VR and increase the physical or sensory pleasure of users. The limitations of this goal is that VR is very demanding, so if the solution is software, it needs to be lightweight, that current overlay options are limited to 2D menus and not 3D models or environments, and that cables are a tripping hazard, especially in VR where you can't see them. Here I think it will be useful to review the two most common VR locomotion methods to better understand the survey data. Continuous movement acts as a normal pancake game would, where the controller's analog stick controls the direction and speed of movement. Teleport or blink is a compromise to movement that players tend to dislike. While we'll see that it helps with motion sickness, it also breaks immersion and the psychological pleasure of exploring a new environment. Here we can see a detailed breakdown of the games those who experienced motion sickness played, along with the types of locomotion each game uses. Note the popularity of Beat Saber, and that its movement type is stationary, meaning that the player doesn't traverse an environment. Here we can see which of those games cause players to feel sick. 78% of the 150 Boneworks players from the first graph felt sick. Comparing that to Beat Saber's single case of motion sickness shows the effects continuous locomotion can have. The next few slides examine this difference. Here's an example of what a Beat Saber level might look like. There's a lot of motion on screen, but the way our brain interprets it makes it manageable even to those with motion sickness. Even though the cubes travel toward you, there's a large static background. We interpret this as the cubes moving towards us rather than the environment. Boneworks, in comparison, makes it as obvious as possible that the player is moving through the environment. In Boneworks, your character has an entire body that tries its best to calculate arm and leg positions based on you and the environment. You can walk, sprint, jump, and crouch, and the way your virtual body interacts with the environment confuses the senses, resulting in feeling unwell. To test the limits of this theory, my prototype will reflect these attributes. Given that this is focusing on environmental interaction, movement, and not necessarily game mechanics, the combat aspects will be ignored, maybe for another time. And so, we enter the prototyping phase. Here is the overlay section of my prototype. A camera in the center of a room tracks the real-world position and rotation of the VR headset. I use something called a stencil shader to poke a hole through the room to see the underlying game layer. This is the circle you can see in both the world and camera previews. This essentially acts like a picture frame or clipping mask in Photoshop. The game is the layer beneath the overlay, and you can see it through the hole. This is meant to emulate the static background in Beat Saber that allows people with motion sickness to feel comfort while in the game. This is the underlying game section, emulating the movement and interactivity of the Boneworks character. This section was necessary, as previously stated in the presentation. Current overlay technologies in VR are limited to 2D menus and not 3D environments. In addition to the player character's interactions, I also created a short obstacle course to test each aspect. Here you can see me playing through the obstacle course. The final platform allows the player to pass through it. This is to test the effects of anticipation and its impact on motion sickness. This is what the left and right eyes see when the overlay is turned on. The continuous movement of the in-game character only applies to the bottom game layer, where the overlay camera stays locked to the VR headset. This overlay takes up much less of the screen in the headset as the lenses are convex rather than flat like how we're seeing them in this preview. Striking the right game to overlay ratio was important, as I didn't want to impede on the psychological pleasures of exploring a new environment. To test this, I asked my mom, who does experience motion sickness, to play through the obstacle course once without the overlay and once with it. There was a short break between the trials to ensure that she was well. Here is a shortened recording of both of the trials.
I got snazzy gloves. I like them. Okay, I can't remember what you said. Oh, yeah. No, that is a little bit not so pleasant already. Okay, let's try the other one that won't make me puke.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and you just...
I think I fell.
Yeah. So how do you feel?
Oh, that's amazing, the difference. Don't you dare fall off. Did I fall off? Did I seriously fall off?
At the end, we can see that the time played with the overlay was over 3 times greater than without it. Not only that, but motion sickness didn't end the trial, she just finished it. She felt well enough to continue playing without issue. This means that, at least in her case, the overlay was effective in reducing her motion sickness. Here's the updated storyboard featuring the prototype. Here we are again at Oscar's place. Oscar is able to play Boneworks without issue. Beat Saber's static background allows John to play despite his motion sickness. While playing Half-Life Alyx with continuous movement enabled, John starts to feel sick. He tells Oscar of his problem and asks if he knows of a solution. Oscar knows of an overlay program or option in the game's settings menu that he's heard helps with this kind of thing. They turn the overlay on, and John is able to use the more immersive and psychologically pleasurable continuous movement scheme while still feeling a sense of physical pleasure. John is even able to have fun playing Boneworks in comfort thanks to the added physical security of the overlay. John becomes one with the virtual realm and transcends motion sickness altogether to become a being of pure physical pleasure. John now loves VR and doesn't associate it with feeling sick. Here are the references used in the data sections of this presentation. Here were the resources used in creating the prototype. This concludes the presentation. Thank you.